and welcome to the next episode in the Future People podcast series. Today I am joined by Queenet and Evie, who are shortly going to introduce ourselves, and we are going to be talking about pupillage applications. So it's a couple of weeks, just over 2 weeks before applications are going to be submitted. So we're going to give you some top tips before those applications go in. So Evie, do you want to kick us off with an introduction?
Sure thing. Hi guys, I'm Evie Smith. I'm the Future Pupil Programme Coordinator at ULaw. I essentially work with pre-BPC students, helping them with how to apply for pupillage and how to apply for the bar course and everything in between. I am going to be starting a criminal pupillage at Foundry Chambers this October.
Amazing, thank you Evie. And Queenet, over to you.
Hi guys, my name is Queenet, as Amy has nicely introduced me. I work as a pro bono employment administrator within the pro bono department at ULaw. And what I do is that I try and find legal opportunities, legal experiences with organisations, lawyers, judges, courts, tribunals, and try and get our current law students to take advantage of those opportunities and help them get legal experience so that they can put on their CV. I will be joining 5 Pump Court as a future, family-only pupil in, this year really. I was going to say in 2023, but we are in 2023.
Yeah, both of you are signed this October, I believe. Is that right, Evie?
Yes.
Yeah, precisely.
Perfect. Lovely, thank you both. So we're going to kick things off by talking about drafting, so the kind of content of your applications as we're later down the line in the application cycle, people have started drafting. So let's start with discussing the why barrister question, because this is one that people find difficult. It's hard to be original while also being genuine, and it's hard to articulate your reasons why you want to be a barrister sometimes. So Evie, what are your top tips for a good answer to the why barrister question?
Yeah, it's really difficult, these questions. They're so broad in scope. And if you're not really careful, you fall into the trap of answering all the why do you want to be a barrister? Why will you be a good barrister? Why this practice area? You risk them all collapsing into the same question. So why do you want to be a barrister is focused on your motivations for coming to the bar. I personally addressed it as asking 2 things. Firstly, what is my understanding of the bar? What exposure have I had to the bar? What have I seen at the bar? Have I seen the realities of life at the bar? And then the second part, I think, is being able to articulate in a very personal and engaging way why you want to do what you've seen on your work experience, why you want to do what you've seen when you've been exposed to the bar. So this is a great question, I think, to bring in things like minis, pupillage open evenings, any of that kind of experience, what articles you've read, maybe in terms of like practicing people in chambers. Bring that all together, group it together, your marshalling experience, and then really sit and think about why it is you want to be a barrister, why you want to do what you've seen. And for me, it was always about the advocacy. So I would talk in this question about how I did mock trial from a very young age, fell in love with the advocacy. And then when it got to the point later on in my experience, when I was doing minis and when I worked with prisoners, that solidified that it was that grouping of courtroom advocacy and the interpersonal side of working with people in very desperate situations and helping them. Those 2 things together was why I wanted to be a barrister. What about you, Queenet? How did you approach it?
Well, I didn't actually have that question on my application. And I'm surprised Amy hasn't said it, but I only did 1 application. So yeah, I didn't have that, but I echo everything Evie has said. I had something similar in terms of, because my chambers is a multidisciplinary set, and so they kind of ask you what area of law you're interested in, and it was quite similar. What exposure I've had to family law, what's made me sure that I want to go down this route, and I actually included some cases in that question as well, and just referred to what I picked up from that case, and linked it back as to why I was interested in that area of law, which obviously the set practices in. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's been touched on, but I think this is a good opportunity, as Evie said, about demonstrating you've got exposure to the bar. Really show why the realities of being a barrister is something that appeals to you. So that can be things like maybe the self-employed nature of the bar, or other practicalities of the job. What is specific to the role of a barrister that appeals to you? You don't want your answer to this question to be one that could be answering a different profession. Why a different profession? It needs to be specific to the bar, as the other two have already picked up on. So another kind of difficult one, I think,
just
and it's distinctly
quickly, Amy. Just to piggyback on your point, I think it, in terms of the self-employed aspect, I do think that's such a good thing to talk about. I covered it in my applications, but I just think it's important to remind people to be careful of showing that you understand the realities of self-employment. You do need to remember who your reader is. It could be a barrister that's about to go on maternity leave. She's not going to get paid for that period of time. Or it could be a barrister that's been sick in the past and not had sick pay. Self-employment does come with a lot of downside. So just make sure you're being really realistic in what aspects of self-employment you like and show you understand it. And I think also in terms of realism, don't be too idealistic in this answer. Even if you've got really, really good motivations for wanting to go to the bar, you want to save the planet, you want to save people that are marginalized, that's really good, but make sure you're backing it up with evidence. Don't just be really idealistic and cliched. It's just a quick point from me. But sorry, Amy, carry on.
No, that's an excellent point, Evie. Absolutely. With all points that you make, they need to be realistic. And yeah, that's very relevant when discussing the self-employed nature of the bar. So I was just going to move on to a distinctly different question, but I think people can often blur the why barrister question and the why will you make a good barrister question, and it's important to keep them different because they are different questions. So Evie, how did you go about approaching the why good barrister? So did you take it by skill, by experience? How did you address it?
Yeah, so I would typically answer this in a sort of 3 to 4 paragraph formula. The times I would step away from that is when there are separate questions asking for particular skills, such as tell us about all of your advocacy experience, or tell us about a time you've shown initiative, or tell us why you think you've got the stamina to practice at the criminal bar. Anything like that, then you need to adapt the question and make sure you're drawing on different skills in this question. But if you don't have that and it's just a standard, why would you be a good barrister question? For me, for the criminal bar, my top skills were oral advocacy, which I linked to my mock trial experience, my mooting experience, and my real life advocacy experience in the county court. Written advocacy, which I linked to my role at Intervene Project, managing case files and managing prisoners' claims. What's the next one? Interpersonal skills, which again, I linked to working with prisoners and all of the issues that they faced and how I overcame sort of trying to separate the personal from the professional in terms of dealing with very emotionally distressing situations and also cultivating trusting relationships. And then finally, a skill I selected was that I thought I had the ability to manage a caseload at the criminal bar, that I had the energy for it, the stamina for it, and the drive. So those were my 4 skills. And then I took skill by skill and brought in the best piece of experience I thought I had to back up that skill. I think
that's the key point there, isn't it, Evie? That you've not only highlighted skills that are clearly relevant to your practice area and to being a barrister, but then backed it up with strong evidence.
Absolutely. Always think like a barrister in these applications. Every single point you make, every single adjective you use must be backed up with evidence, and only use your strong points. Do not think you need to dwell on any weaknesses in these applications. They are your pitch.
Queenet, was this a question that appeared on your one application form?
Yes, it was actually. And just as Evie said, it was actually one that was in 2 parts. So it was a question of why do you believe you'll make an excellent barrister? And they asked you not to refer to your advocacy skills. And then there was a separate question asking to demonstrate your recent
It's
or a
so
good example.
mean when they do that.
It is quite mean,
so
actually. But you know
mean.
what? Looking back on the application, I'm actually quite glad it was separate, because I was able to talk about other skills without always constantly referring to my advocacy skills. So the top 3 ones that I gave, or the 3 that I put down for my application, was interpersonal skills. And as a family barrister, you know, that's quite important, and that's what they want to see. So it was interpersonal skills. And at the time I was working as a paralegal in a law firm, so I was able to bring in my legal experiences and give examples of that. The second one was resilience, and I was able to talk about actually how I was able to obtain a scholarship from Middle Temple and what that scholarship actually meant, and the type of people it was awarded to. And then my last one was I said that I was innovative, and I referred back to my dissertation actually that I did, that I scored a distinction in, and described why it was innovative. And then about the advocacy one, I obviously gave my top 3, which was, this is the advocacy skills that I have to date. And I also spoke about public speaking, which is actually a form of advocacy. So yeah.
Great, thank you both. And kind of finishing off the why questions that often appear on application forms, the why chambers question often students struggle with, again, coming up with an original and genuine answer to these questions. Evie, how do you go about approaching these why chambers questions?
Yeah, it's a grim question. We all think it. What's really important to remember is everybody's in the same boat. Not many people will have something absolutely groundbreaking to say about why they want that chambers. Just bear that in mind. All chambers are looking for is to learn more about you and to check that you're suitable for their chambers. I always think that there are 4 ways that you can kind of answer this question, or 4 things you can bring in. Firstly, direct experiences with the chambers are always going to be brilliant. Think mini pupillages, think webinars, think pupillage insight evenings. Reading articles from members of that chambers are always great. The second thing you can do is look at really niche areas of practice in that chambers and talk about why they interest you too. Like for me at the criminal bar, a lot of the chambers did sports law. I was always interested in, from my uni experiences playing rugby, when would tackling and very rough play turn into ABH, GBH, and criminal activity. So I talked a bit about that. A third thing you can talk about are cases that chambers have been involved in, but do so at your own peril. You may get someone on your interview panel that was actually in that case, and they will be waiting very happily to talk to you about it and grill you about it. So make sure you know the ins and outs of your stuff if you're going to talk about cases. And finally, I'm falling into that awful interview trap of forgetting my final point. Oh, yes. The less objective aspects of chambers, think diversity, think ethos, think their character, just the vibe they give you. Maybe you can say some cool things about that too. But what about you guys? What do you guys think?
Queenet, did this feature on yours? I can't remember.
It didn't, no. But I think in helping me to apply for or helping me to know what chambers I was going to apply for, one thing that I did was firstly attend Pupillage. Well, chambers is open evening, I think that's what they call it.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of getting a feel of what chambers are like through the people that were on the panel, and obviously doing research. So whilst I didn't have that question in my head, I already knew why I was applying to this chambers. I felt like I could fit in. I felt like my personality would complement the set really well. And I did some research of members that were already there. Like Evie said, I looked up cases that members were involved in. You can do that through LexisNexis, where you can put some of the council's name in the filter section, and it will give you a list of cases that have been reported that they've been part of, and you kind of get a feel of the sort of cases that they deal with, the sort of cases that they get. So yeah, that probably would have been my approach.
So moving on from the why questions and thinking about the application more broadly, I think it's sometimes easy to forget about some non-legal experience that you may have, maybe hobbies or work experience outside of the law, that will be really relevant to applications, and it's not to be forgotten. So Evie, you spoke, I'm sure, about non-legal experiences or hobbies on your application form. They're important, aren't they, to applications?
Yeah, absolutely. They show character, they show resilience. Part-time work is really, really good. Barristers will really respect if you've had to really work to get where you are, whilst doing really difficult courses such as law degrees, GDLs, bar courses. They will really respect that. Don't underestimate the skills you can extract. Similarly, rugby for me gave me all kinds of springboards for jokes. Great times in the interviews with that, because I am basically 5 foot and was on the front row of a rugby team. So of course, anyone that played rugby on those interview panels found that hilarious. So yeah, it's just really good for really fleshing out your character in your applications. Never forget the value of doing that. The key in such a massive pond of applications is to be memorable. So the things that you have that not everyone will have, such as your non-legal experiences, are just so good for that. But yeah, I back you all the way, Amy. Non-legal experiences are so relevant. Just make sure you're extracting those skills that are relevant for the bar, or using those experiences to show character.
Absolutely. And touching on what you said about part-time work, Evie, things like bar work. So I spoke about working at bar and the skills that gave me, particularly interpersonal skills and other relevant skills that you can bring back to the bar. Same with nannying and waitressing. There are loads of different skills you can pick out of this part-time work that might not be immediately obvious, but go through these experiences and really think about, what did I do? What skills were being engaged while I was doing those jobs, and how can I bring back to the bar? Because they are really relevant and definitely can be discussed on pupillage applications. Queenet, what are your thoughts on this? Would you say that you use some non-legal experiences in your application?
No, I think mine was just mainly legal experience, legal employment as experience. And that's mainly because I was working as a paralegal at the time. Yeah, so no, I didn't have non-legal experience. However, I did bring in, like I said, public speaking, which wasn't to do with anything legal. I just was talking about how I was a leader at a society when I was at undergrad university, and I also spoke about how I've been invited back by my secondary school to be a guest speaker. So I brought those experiences in, which was quite helpful.
Yeah, and which are maybe not immediately things that you might think about in a pupillage application, but are really relevant because, as you said, it's public speaking, it's an ability to communicate with different audiences.
Yeah, and I think one thing, like when answering, those kind of questions, is I found that a lot of these questions, there's at first instance you think, yeah, I know the answer that I could give, but then when you look back on it, you think, well, it fulfills the question, but how can I make it different and how can I make it unique? And one thing that really helped me was going for walks, coming back and looking at it and just having a think through of, okay, right, yes, this answers the question, but am I happy with this? Like, other applicants giving this answer as well. So even that public speaking one, I didn't even remember that I had done all that public speaking until I went for a walk and I was just looking through my CV, and like an old CV actually, and seeing what was there. So sometimes you have done non-legal stuff, or you've done stuff that isn't immediately, like you said, immediately there, that you can relate back to your advocacy skills, but it actually does have an underlying form of advocacy there if you just unpick it.
Absolutely. So moving away from the drafting stage, so we've done all the drafting, unless you two want to say any last final words on kind of content of applications before I move on to formatting, etc.
I'm not sure actually if this falls within formatting or drafting with content, so I guess it's a good springboard for you, Amy. But I just want to remind anyone listening, remember who your reader is. It's going to be overworked barristers. They're doing this in their free time. they would much rather be at home with their families or socializing after a really long day in court. You need to make the task of them picking up your application and putting you in the yes pile as swift as possible. Do not be writing in really long, convoluted sentences unnecessarily. Do not be clogging up your applications with waffle, and we'll go into how you can avoid that very shortly. And do not be making your applications really difficult to follow and read. Don't have turn back to page 2 to find out more about this cool moot. That's just ridiculous. Keep everything really tight, succinct, and well laid out. And your reader will be so, so grateful for it.
Absolutely. And I think this comes down to accessibility, as you said, Evie. And one way you can do that is breaking up your questions. So for me, the why would I make a good barrister and why barrister, I broke up into 3 headings. So I'd have 3 separate skills for the why good barrister and the 3 reasons for the why barrister question. And it just means that straight away, the person reading this can see where I'm going with this answer, and it's very easily accessible. And that's something that's really important. And you can use bullet points, you can use headings, whatever way you can best portray what you're trying to say in your application, go for it. You use bullet points, am I right in thinking, Evie, in some of your answers?
Absolutely. Everything you say, Amy, I absolutely echo. This is a piece of written advocacy. Write your application like a barrister, using the best techniques in terms of bullet points, numbering to get your points across is absolutely excellent. And you will get a lot of points for style of writing. In every mark scheme I've seen from Chambers, how the application is presented plays a massive part, because that is the strongest piece of evidence a barrister will have that you are a good advocate on paper, because they'll always believe what you've given them over what you've got down on a CV. So just use this to the best of your abilities as a chance to shine as a written advocate. And yeah, just play around with words a bit, play around with written techniques, written structures, and always make sure that you're presenting things in the best way possible.
Queenet, did you use headings or bullet points at all? How did you go about the written process of your application?
Echoing what Evie said, I did use bullet points, headings, underline to make it stand out, especially the ones where it's, you know, you're listing, you know, it's going to be a list. You don't want a list to be in a paragraph. You want, this is your point, and then you explain and link back to the point you're making. I would also say just use your discretion for the questions that might not be appropriate for you to use bullet points and headings. But it's down to your discretion. I've got a mix and match in my application.
Great. And another important thing when it's coming before submitting these applications, and once you've checked your formatting, is proofreading and making sure you're aware of some common mistakes that it's easy to make, and traps that it's easy to fall into. Evie, you have some good common mistakes to talk about.
Yeah, of course. I was always the type that would be writing these applications well into the early hours. So spelling, punctuation and grammar mistakes were all over my forms. Obviously not by the time I sent them off, but certainly in those early drafts. So practice, practice. The verb is with an S. The noun is with a C. Advice and advise is a bit of a killer one. If you want to use American English, that's fine, but you must do so consistently. Otherwise, they think you can't spell. I would always advise you to use British English in these forms, but if you want to use American English, no one can really penalize you for it as long as you use it consistently. Yeah, with your formatting as well, copying and pasting answers from, say, where you've drafted them in Word into the gateway, there can sometimes be glitches, so just watch out for that as well. Things like apostrophes, using too informal language can also be a bit of a trap to fall down. Amy, do you have any others you'd want to add in there?
I think you've covered some of the main ones. I think you've mentioned this before, Evie, but making sure you're using James's name correctly and you're spelling it correctly, because that would not go down well. And just think about how you're going to make sure your applications are checked. So what I did, I had 3 folders on my laptop. The first one was for first drafts, second one was for drafts that had been edited, and then the next one was final, ready to go drafts. And this way, you just make sure that all your applications have been checked, and that when you're submitting them, you're submitting the ones that you've proofread and that you're happy with. So come up with a system that works for you to make sure all your applications are checked and proofread before you send them off. Queenet, how did you go about efficiently proofreading your applications? Well, your one application.
Firstly, I sent it off to legal and non-legal people to proofread it for me. One thing that I did was that I would proofread it at different times in the day. So I'll probably proofread it around 3 times in a day, but it was probably in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. Word has this function which is it read over? I don't know what it's actually called, but you can just ask Word to read it out for you. And so I used to use that tool as well, which I found quite helpful. Reading it out loud as well, because sometimes it's really, really easy, especially if you're staying up late trying to fix your application, where you realize you've duplicated some stuff and you're saying things that don't actually make sense. So that's what I'd advise. I think depending on how you work, I think Amy's previously mentioned that she found it easy printing it out and reading that way. Sometimes I use different devices. Sometimes I have have it on a big screen. Sometimes I have it on a small screen. Just finding what works for you and just constantly going back, because there's nothing worse than your application not going through because of just poor grammar, poor spellings, poor presentation, when it could actually have the potential to make it through to a first round.
Absolutely. And another mistake that I just thought about is not capitalizing the bar. So when you refer to the bar, B has a capital letter. So remember that. But then lowercase for barrister. Am I right, Evie?
Absolutely. Be really careful about your capitals. Magistrates Court is lowercase and it's got an apostrophe on the end. Crown Court is capital letters. Just spend some time, really look at some legal writing. Oh, Amy, your favorite, judgment and judgment. Remember those two. Just be really, really precise with your writing, because it shows more than just being able to spell. That's not the point of it. Everyone knows everyone makes spelling mistakes every now and again. It's not that. It's more showing that you have the attention to detail that they're looking for at the bar to spot your errors and correct them. And just simply writing in a way that's not messy. So just take the time and you'll be absolutely fine. Another top tip from me as well, I would refrain from sending off applications sort of every now and then in drops. Rather, save all of your completed applications and submit them together towards the end of the cycle. Because if you spot a mistake that will be in every single one of your applications right at the end, after you submit them all, you're going to be kicking yourself and really upset. So I would suggest send them all at the end once you're confident they're all flawless.
Absolutely. And I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to just jump from that, Evie. It links well to, I agree. I think wait till near the end of submission to submit, to make sure that you don't have any, you might have also just come up with some good ideas that you could filter into applications that you might have thought were finished, but don't leave it too late. You won't be getting any sympathy if you miss the deadline. Do try and get it in a day before. Be mindful that there might be technical issues. So do be aware of that and try and get it done the day before. It's stressful for the individual if you're up late at night before the deadline trying to get it in, which I think, I was certainly there, and I think Evie's made reference to that as well. It's much simpler and much safer to try and get it in the day before. But any quick final thoughts from you both? I'm conscious of time. Our recording will soon run out, but any final words for the pupillage applicants of this cycle, Evie and Queenet?
Just from me, just be brave with it. Best of luck with it. It's an exciting process. You're making applications for one of the coolest jobs in the world. And once you eventually get pupillage, it will be the best day of your life. Me and Amy have chatted about this and we both agree it was one of our favorite days. So it will all be worth it. And just remember, some of your applications will receive a rejection. I've not heard of a single person get a flawless round of acceptances and invites to interviews. So just remember, each rejection is purely they're rejecting that form. They're not rejecting you. You can always switch up a formula in an application, change things, tweak things, do a bit more research, and the next year your form will succeed. So never let the rejections hold you back, knock your confidence, and always remember you can apply to the same sets the next year and they won't mind. But that's it from me. Best of luck, guys.
Some final thoughts from you, Queenet?
Be brave, be yourself. Don't draft your application as if it's what you think chambers want, but just be yourself, be authentic. Let your personality, let your experiences, let who you are shine through your application, as well as all the other tips we've given about structure, presentation, and the information you should have. Know your chambers well. If it's, a chamber that can deal with a bit of humor, bring out your humor in it. If it's not, then, write in a way that, complements the set that you're applying to. But as Evie says, no one doesn't, like, you're most likely going to get a rejection from one set, and that's fine. Don't let that knock your confidence. You'll get there in the end. It takes a while, but just remain confident, remain committed, and all the best in this year.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, both. You have some excellent advice, and I hope it's been useful to the listeners. As has been just touched on, the next episode is going to be about dealing with rejection, because it happens. As Evie said, we don't know anybody that got a whole load of interviews compared to applications. So that will be the next episode. So for now, goodbye, and thank you for listening.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.